Oh, you know what? All right, I will say good morning. I'm sorry, I don't know where the microphone is. So in Meretz Hashem, we're gonna. So maybe if the Chabra in the back wants to move up a little bit, this is about as loud as I'm gonna be able to get this morning. I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I don't know where the speaker is. I don't know where the speaker is. All right, maybe it's. The truth is, we borrowed the speaker. It may be time for us to purchase our own. It looks like maybe the individual who owns it is using it. All right, I'm sorry. I apologize for the inconvenience. And I will say, let us begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Elul, Shani and Avram Kelman in honor of Yichil's engagement to Alana Falik in memory of their parents, Jerome and Bernice Kelman and Alexander Federica David Zichronim Livracha. To thank Barak, Maya, Sandy Hoffman, Dora Limas, and Avi Malamed for dedicating the Shurim and Drushos this month in memory of Ruben ben Emmanuel. To thank Eyal and Sarah Steinberg in sponsoring the Drushos this month, Shurim and Drushos this month. The Schus V'Refuah Shalema for Shulamis Bas Susha, and the Daf Yomi Shir and the Schus V'Refuah Shalema for Yehuda ben Michal. We thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Matt and Diane Marks, for dedicating the Shurim this week in honor of the birth of their grandson, Yehuda Yeshaya Marks. May be Zoch Meretz Hashem Legad Torah Ulechuppah Ulemaisim Tovim. So both say with that, let us begin. We hope in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshama shav and aliyah, all of those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Now, both say with that, we have an absolutely incredible, I know people accuse me of overusing it, right? But first of all, I'm always right. I feel every single time I've delivered whenever I've promised an incredible daf. And I will say now, by the next couple of days are just wild. So we'll say we're going to begin actually. Today's daf is Samich 60. We're actually going to begin on it's the last phrase on Nuntes Amud Beis Im Haya Makira. So remember again, we were introduced in the Brisa yesterday to the concept. Well, in the Mishnah, we were introduced to the idea of domestic responsibilities that a woman has. One of those responsibilities ultimately was nursing her child. So the Brisa brought up the situation of what happens if a woman is nursing and the couple gets divorced. So the Brisa explained as follows. The Brisa said, let me just quote it to you. So niskar she'ena kofa. Obviously, if they get divorced, so the husband cannot compel the wife to nurse. Obviously, he can't compel to do anything. They're divorced. However, makira, if the baby recognized the mother, no sein la schara, the kofa menikasa. In that case, the husband is obligated to pay his ex-wife. And again, I will say, what does it mean to pay his ex-wife? In other words, he's obligated to pay her the wage as if she were a wet nurse. And in that case, then we would compel the ex-wife, the mother, to go ahead and nurse her child. Why? Mipnei sakana. Because since there is already an attachment between baby and mother, we are concerned that halacha l'maisa, if she does not go ahead and nurse the baby, this could put the baby in mortal danger. Good. So it says the Gemara Haya Makira, top of Samech. Ad kama. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. So halacha l'maisa, take a look at Rashi. Ad kama. Kama chadashim islan l'meimar sheodea lahakira milanek meisha acheres. So we'll say, the Gemara asks a simple question. How old does a baby have to be in order to recognize its mother? Interesting shayla. So the Gemara says, Amarav, Amarav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amarav, Shlosha Chadashim. 3 months. 3 months. I will say, so just to understand what this means is that up until 3 months, we assume that a baby doesn't recognize its mother, and therefore, were the couple to go ahead and get divorced, the ex-husband could not compel his ex-wife to nurse. Because up until 3 months, there's not necessarily a nursing connection between mother and child. So the Gemara says, Shmuel says, Shloshim Yom. No, not 3 months, 30 days. Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan, Chamishim Yom, 50 days. I'm going to see in Barabaye. Halacha Rabbi Yitzchak Sha'amar Mishum Rabbi Yochanan. Ultimately, again, the halacha is like Rabbi Yitzchak, who said this over in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, i.e., 50 days. 50 days. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan kol chad v'chad ki churfei. Shabbos, here's what's interesting. I understand Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, right? So remember again, Rav said 3 months. Rav said 3 months. Rabbi Yochanan said 50 days. What's the chiluk between 3 months and 50 days, Rabbi Osai? What's the chiluk? 10 days, right? 10 days. So you could attribute that. So essentially what the Gemara is saying is they're kind of in the same range, right? They're kind of in the same range, right? But Lamaisa, I'm sorry, 50 days and 90 days, excuse me. So they're kind of in the same range, right? In other words, that's a spectrum. That's a spectrum. But Lamaisa, again, so you could attribute that swing to what? To just chorfe literally means the sharpness of the child. In other words, that there's a range in infant development. Fine. The Gemara says, Ela l'Shmuel ki agadla mimishkachosla. But Shmuel, is there a baby who recognizes its mother within 30 days? In other words, the Gemara just feels that that's very nabasa. When we say recognize, remember, we're speaking about a recognition in a very specific way, namely that the child would only nurse from its mother and not nurse from anyone else. Does that level of recognition come about at such a young age? To which the Gemara says, so listen to this. Ki Asrami bar Yecheskel, when Bar Yecheskel came along, Amar, he said, Lo tasesinu lahani klali dekal Yehuda achi mishmei deshmua. This is great, nothing like brothers. So Bar Yecheskel comes along and says, listen, don't listen to anything my brother Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel. Right? This dynamic plays itself out amongst brothers in every family. Halavai, it should be in learning, right? Don't listen to anything my brother said in the name of Shmuel. Hachi Amar Shmuel. This is what Shmuel said. Rabbi said Shmuel didn't say 30 days. What did Shmuel say? Kolzman shemakira. So Rabbi say Shmuel essentially said, Rabbi say, when does a baby recognize its mother? When a baby recognizes its mother. In other words, what Shmuel said is there is no objective amount of time. There's no objective amount of time that halacha l'maisa we now say, at this age a baby recognizes its mother. Every child is gauged in accordance with its own development. So we'll say the Gemara tells a story. This is an incredible story. There was a woman who came before Shmuel. Now Rashi says, hey, no, it's a woman. Rashi says, Huda soy, Rashi hahi, this is in the keva, grusha, velo haisa rotze lahanik. See, here's the case, Rabbi saying. Reuven and Rachel are married. They got divorced. Rachel came before Shmuel. And what happened? Rachel no longer wanted to nurse her son. Rabbi saying, so just to understand. So remember again, Rachel doesn't, this is not chas v'shalom the case of a mother who's neglecting her child. She doesn't want to nurse. There are plenty of them who don't want to nurse. So again, why is she in Beis Din? Right? So remember, why is she in Beis Din? I will say, what is she looking for? What is she looking for from Shmuel? So two things. Remember, a heter not to nurse, and by extension, once she has a heter not to nurse, what happens then? Husband, right? Well, sorry, ex-husband, father of the baby, will then be obligated to what? To pay for a wet nurse. So that's what's happening over here. So she comes before Shmuel. So we'll say, listen to this. Amrle Rav Dimi bar Yosef. So Shmuel said to Rav Dimi bar Yosef, Zil Batka, go see if the baby is attached to his mother. So we'll say, this is incredible. Azal Osva Bedari Dinashi. So what does Rav Dimi do? He creates a lineup, right? There's a lineup of women, and what happens? So the kamahadar le iluye. Now, both say, so just to understand, what is Rav Dimi looking for? He's looking for recognition. He's looking to see, does this baby, the baby's not nursing from all of these women, right? What's happening over here is we want to see, is there a recognition between the baby and the mother? Because remember again, Shmuel is of the opinion that the truth is there's no recognition happens when recognition happens. It's up to the baby. So literally again, Rav Dimi is making a mother lineup, right? The mother lineup. Out of a lineup of women, can this baby identify its mother? This is incredible. So the Gemara says, Kimata legabe, when Rav Dimi was holding the baby in front of its mother, havakama apa. The baby wouldn't take its eyes off its mother. Kaveshtani le'ene mine. But the mother began to look down. So the mother didn't want to make eye contact with the baby because she knew that the baby would recognize her. Amrla, so Rav Dimi said, Nataf einech, lift up your eyes, Kum dari barach, and take your son. In other words, Rabbi say it became abundantly clear that what? That the baby recognized his mother. So once the baby recognizes its mother, then what? Then there's an obligation ultimately for the mother to continue to nurse. So this is how Shmuel resolved this particular idea. Rabbi say it's such an incredibly beautiful, it's just such a fascinating idea, and also so incredibly beautiful, like alza hashkafic ideas. Like Rabbi say sometimes. Well, actually, we'll come back to that shkaf in a little bit. Let's go weiter. So the Gemara says as follows. So, suma mina yada, what about a baby chas v'shalom is blind? What about if the baby is blind? How would you establish recognition in the situation of a blind baby? To which the Gemara says, Amar Rashi, berecha ubetaima. Ultimately, the baby can become attached to its mother through her scent, and ultimately, again, through her milk. So again, obviously we know that when a person lacks one sense, ultimately, like one sense is no longer there, other senses are heightened. So a blind baby could become attached to its mother, again, through the taste of her milk and through her scent. Incredible. Says the Gemara. By the way, we'll see, interestingly enough, that all of this is it is halacha ma'aseh. See, all of these are halachas in Shulchan Aruch. We'll discuss them when we get to the end of the sugya. So Tana Rabbanan. Yonek tinok v'holech ad esim v'arba chodesh. Shabbos say this is actually quite fascinating. So the Gemara says as follows: Yonek tinok v'holech ad esim v'arba chodesh. A mother can nurse her child up until the age of 24 months. Mikan ve'elech ki yonek sheketz divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Shabbos say the lashon of it is very interesting. After 2 years, after 24 months, it's like nursing. It's like nursing a sheketz. Like no, sheket is a creepy, crawly, non-kosher creature, right? It's like right. So the idea over here is that what? That halacha l'maisa, Rabbi Eliezer says up to 2 years is the cap for nursing. Now, but if you look at Rashi, it's actually interesting. Ki yonik sheketz, ki ilu yonik davar meshukatz. Now, so the truth is, sheketz, sherets, we also use them interchangeably. Sheketz just means something, meshukatz means something repulsive. Something repulsive. The idea Rabbi Eliezer is saying is the act of nursing after 2 years old is something that is repulsive. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua says, "Afilu arba v'chamesh shanim." No, you can nurse a child even up to 4 or 5 years old. Now, I want to point out something fascinating. To us, that sounds crazy, right? That sounds crazy. But also understand that in poorer societies, the ability to rely on mother's milk for sustained amounts of time was also an economic decision. So remember, again, we have formula. We also have access, Baruch Hashem, to food. So I'm just pointing out this idea of this concept of nursing to an advanced age is strange, but in an impoverished society, it could be incredibly important. In any event, this is Machlokes. Rabbi Yeshua says no, even up to 4 or 5 years old. Now here's what's interesting. Perish la'achar esim va'arba chodesh the chazar, but if the baby stopped after 2 years old and then resumed nursing, kiyonik sheketz, then again everyone agrees that ultimately again that is a repulsive act. So I say here mikan ve'elech. So Amar Mar mikan ve'elech kiyonik sheketz, and from there forward. From there on, it's like going at a nursing repulsive thing. So we'll say, here's our machlokes. Our machlokes, first stage in the machlokes is Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Eliezer is saying nursing goes up until 2 years. Rabbi Yoshua even up to 4 or 5 years. That's machlokes 1. The second stage of this, which does not seem to be a machlokes, seems to everybody agrees that if the mother stops nursing after 2 years, once you stop, you can't resume. Now, what's missing from this is what? How long of a what's stoppage? How long of a stoppage is that? Right? It was 1 day, 2 days, 5 years, a month, a week. Well, what is it? Okay, that we'll see. So we'll say, listen to this. Or minhi. So the Gemara raises a kasha. Now the kasha is on this concept of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer telling us that a mother's milk after 2 years essentially becomes off limits to the child. That's Rabbi Eliezer's shita. A child could nurse up to 2 years. Afterwards, it's kiyonik sheket. So we'll say this is a fascinating Gemara. Or mini, Gemara quotes Raisa. You might have thought that what? That the milk of one who walks on 2 legs is tamei. Now, we'll say, what's one who walks on 2 legs? Mahal cheshtayim. Rashi says over here, chalav shel isha hamehaleches b'shtei raglayim. ultimately, again, Mahalchi Shem was our human beings. Also, I'll just point out something very interesting. There is a beautiful idea in the Mishnah in the first parak of Pirkei Avos, where Hillel says, "Hevi mitamidav sha'aron." Be of the disciples of Aaron. It's in the first parak of Pirkei Avos. Oev shalom, rodev shalom, right? Be of the disciples, love peace, pursue peace. Ohev es habrios umekarvan laTorah. Love creations and bring them close to Torah. The Balatanya, the Shneur Zalman of Liadi, asks a question. Why does Hillel use the lashon of brios? Right? Brios is like one of the most generic terms you could use for people. Right? Because first of all, bria doesn't just have to refer to people. Bria could refer to everything. That happens to be in this context, it is referring to people. But why such a nondescript term for people? Why don't you say Ohev es ha'anoshim? There's so many Ohev es ha'adam. The Baal Tanya says something amazing. He says, in order to love your fellow Jew, you have to find something positive in that individual. And the Baal Tanya says, sometimes you look at certain people, and what's the problem? What's the problem? I can't find anything positive. I can't find anything positive. So ultimately, the Baal Tanya says, sometimes the only positive thing you could find in a person is that he walks on 2 legs instead of 4. And the truth is, that's a maila also. That's something positive. That's something positive. So I will say, where does the Baal Tanya get this from? I think it's from this Gemara. Because here Chazal are calling a human being a mahalche shtayim. What a strange way to describe a human being. Right? It'll say it's so nondescript. In other words, yeah, we walk on 2 legs instead of 4 legs. Sometimes, even if the only positive thing you could find about another person is that they walk on 2 legs instead of 4 legs, go with it. Go with it. It is so desperately important to always find some nekuda tova, some level of positivity in our fellow Jew, because that's the only way we come to love each other. And even if a person, mamish, has nothing else, but the fact that they're not an animal who walks on all 4s, seize that, take that, build on that, and at least love them and appreciate them for that. So the Gemara says as follows, we'll say this is fascinating. So I want to point out, the concept that human milk is permitted for consumption is dramatically amazing. Why? Because I will say, think about this. Generally, milk status is dependent on what? Right? The kashrus of the entity that is producing the milk. This is what we're going to get into right now. So therefore, I will say, based on that, human milk, right? Obviously, human flesh is forbidden for consumption. So based on that, we would say that human milk should be usher. We'll say same way that whatever it is, I don't know, pig milk, camel milk, right? Any other non-kosher animal milk is usher. Is usher. We'll say, by the way, you become acutely aware of this. In America, you don't have this problem, right? Because in America, the USDA regulates the dairy industry, and all milk, unless noted otherwise, is cow milk. When you travel outside of America, right, especially in Europe, so the dairy industry is not as regulated. And so you have to be exceptionally careful with the milk you are drinking and cannot assume at all that it is cow milk. It's quite fascinating. In any event, so I had this experience when I was one time I was flying to Eretz Yisrael through Turkey. And there was a Starbucks in the where is the airport in Istanbul? It's a beautiful airport. Oh my gosh! So there's a Starbucks here. I was getting a cup of coffee. So the person asked me, "Do you want milk?" So it happened to be there was a guy behind me who had a beard and a baseball cap. I said, "I think I saw him at Great Adventure on Chalamayid." Right? He looks. So he taps me on the shoulder. He says, "Don't get the milk. Don't get the milk. Don't get the milk." So I turned around. So I happen to have good with black coffee anyway. So it's just funny. He said to me, he did the research on this. And again, at least here, there was no way of telling where the milk came. All right, any event. So the Gemara says as well. So we'll say, so that's our sugya. Right, Jews are everywhere, even in Istanbul. Right, so we'll say, yeah, incredible. By the way, it's a big schos in life sometimes to have someone behind you to tap your shoulder, right? So you're right about. So the Gemara says as follows. So you might have thought that ultimately, again, the milk of a human being, of a woman, is tamei v'dinhu. And it was, I could have made a good kal v'chomer. Why? So I say, by the way, when we say tamei in this context, tamei, we don't mean it like ritual impurity. We just mean not kosher. Not kosher. So the Gemara says, Vidinhu. Vidinhu, the Gemara says, Vidinhu, right, because that's why Rashi says tamei over here means aser. That's how Rashi is explaining this over here. So here we go. So it says the Gemara, Vidinu. So we'll say an animal, and here's what's interesting about an animal. An animal, when it's alive, cannot convey tumah. There's no such thing as a living animal contracting tumah and conveying tumah to something else. It doesn't exist. So an animal, when it comes to the halachos of conveyance of tumah when it's alive, we're makel, and yet by its milk, right? The milk of a non-kosher animal is aser. Adam, shech marta b'mago. Rabbi say, could a person convey tumah while the person is alive? The answer is absolutely yes. First of all, say the most common case of this is nida, right? When a woman is a nida, she has the ability to convey tumah to other things. So the Gemara says, "Eno din shetachmir b'chabel." Certainly, I would say that her milk should be aser. To which the Gemara says, "Talmud lomar es hagamal kimala gera hu." Rabbi say the pasuk says you can't eat the camel kimala gera hu. Uparsa in a mafris, which means ultimately, again, even though it chews its cud, its hoof is not split. So the Gemara dashins hu tamei ve'ein chelav mahal shtayim tamei. It is only the camel and its milk that is tamei, but ultimately, again, the milk of a woman is not tamei. I will say the truth is, it's a longer drasha than this, and Rashi points out it might also be a drasha from a different part of the pasuk, but for our purposes, this gets the job done. Ella tahar. So I will say this is fascinating. The Gemara is dashing over here. Esagamol kima legera. Who teaches us what? Who teaches us that halacha l'maisa? It is the camel and its milk that are tameim, but ultimately, again, the milk of a woman is not tamei, is permitted. So the Gemara says, Yachol otzies hachalav shenashava bakol, v'lo otzies adam shu shava bakol. So we'll say, based on this, I would have said, it's only human milk that is permitted. Why? Because we'll say human milk is something that doesn't occur throughout the animal kingdom. In other words, there are non-kosher animals that produce milk, non-kosher animals that don't produce milk. So because it's not an isser hashava bakol, it doesn't apply to everything, I would say that's why human milk is permitted. But what about human blood? What about human blood? I would have said human blood should be aser, just like the blood of animals. To which the Gemara says, Talmud lomar, hu tamei ve'indam mahalchi shtayim tamei elatar. I will say this is fascinating. No, who teaches us that it is only the camel, its milk, and its blood that is going to be tamei, but ultimately, again, or aser, but the milk and blood of a human being is going to be permitted. Rabbi says it's actually pretty wild, because the Torah goes out of its way to highlight the Isra of Dam multiple times. The Gemara here is saying, by the way, the Isra of Dam only applies to animal blood, does not apply to human blood. We'll see this play out in just a moment. So we'll say, Amar Rav Shesha, so Rav Shesha says, Afilu mitzas prisha einbo. I will say, when we say that human milk is permitted, it's permitted unequivocally, and there is not even a mitzvahs prisha. We'll say mitzvahs prisha means there is not even an isser derabanan. So we'll say now let's go back. So we'll say what was our kasha? Our kasha is on Rabbi Eliezer. What did Rabbi Eliezer say beforehand? Rabbi Eliezer said a child could nurse up until what age? The age of 24 months. From that point forward, ultimately, again, it's kiyonek shekets. Ultimately, again, it is like an abominable thing. Which sounds like what he's saying is after 24 months, human milk is aser. Now, both say, based on what we learned, when does human milk become aser? Never. So what's going on? To which the Gemara makes an interesting distinction. Lo kasha, ha de parish, ha de lo parish. Rabbi say there is a distinction between human milk that is nursed directly from the mother versus human milk that is expressed from the mother into a kli. So listen to this. Look at Rashi. Fascinating. Had de parish, had diktani mutter, kishepiresh midadi ha'isha. Likli. Vayonik minadod kiyonik sheketz midrabanan. So both say this fascinating. What wants to say is as follows. Technically speaking, human milk is always permitted. Right? Doesn't matter how old, always permitted, as long as that milk is expressed into a kli. When does Rabbi Eliezer say that after a certain amount? When does Rabbi Eliezer say that after 2 years it's kiyonik min hasheket? It's like nursing an abominable or from an abominable thing. That's when the child is nursing directly from the mother. See what Rabbi Eliezer is saying is like this: the act of a child nursing from the mother, that's up to 2 years. After that, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Midrabanan. Midrabanan, you can't do it anymore. But technically speaking, the consumption of human milk from a kli is permitted for however long. So we'll say what would be interesting is, what Rabbi Lezer essentially saying is like this, is that Lamaisa, the cap on nursing is up until 2 years. If a mother wants to continue to pump and use her milk to feed her child, that's fine. It just can't be done as a normative activity. Yes, take a bottle. Yes, take a bottle. Now, both say why this distinction? So we're going to see this. We're going to see this in the Shulchan Aruch. But I'll just tell you the Taz. So both say this is. I'm just telling you this is in Yeridea, Shulchan Aruch Yeridea, Siman Pei Aleph Halacha Zayin. We're going to see all of this. But actually, you know what? Both say let me actually get a little bit further, and then let me get to the two dots. Let me get a little bit further, then we're going to do the halacha. But just hold on. We're going to reconcile all of this. Here we go. Says the Gemara. V'chilufa b'dam. Now, both say let's jump to blood for just a second, because remember again, halacha l'maisa. Both say blood is just the opposite of milk. What does that mean? Blood is just the opposite of milk. Both say this is fascinating. Dam shala kikar. Both say, by the way, this is a very shaykh case. Person takes a bite of bread, and then what happens? You notice there's blood on the bread. What happens? A person's gum is bleeding, right? So, you know how sometimes, when you're a kid, it often happens. Sometimes when you have a loose tooth, you take a bite out of an apple, right? Before the tooth comes out, there's some blood on the apple. So I take a bite out of food, there's blood on the food. What's the halacha now? Can I go ahead and eat that food? So you're both saying, understand, like for us, we live in such a disposable society. So for me, I'm not going to eat that, throw it away. Let's say in a society where they have to be much more careful with their means. So what do I do with that? So what's the halacha? So go to rov va'ochlo. You scrape off the blood and you could eat the food. The Gemara says, however, va'ochlo, shebena shinayim motzitzo, ve'ena choshesh. Ultimately, and we'll say, if there is blood in your mouth, let's say you have blood in your gums, you could suck down that blood. I don't know if that's the right term, like, whatever you do, suck down that blood, right? In other words, you don't have to expel it. You're permitted to go ahead and swallow it. So I will say, here's what I want to point out, something interesting. Midda oraisa, there is no isser of human blood. In other words, you could drink your own blood. You could drink your blood. So, which why, say a person cuts their finger, right? You can go ahead and put that to your mouth and go, one second, I'm eating blood. First of all, as long as that blood is part of your body, there is no isser of consumption. Even when that blood, everything all right over there? Okay. Even when it's fighting with the Yetzer Hara or something. Even when the blood is outside of your body, I will say that is only an Isser D'Rabbanan. Now, when blood is outside of your body, Chazal said we don't want you eating that, which makes sense. Why don't want you eating it? I will say because someone else it's a Marasayan issue. In other words, that does. How do they know if you're eating your blood, animal blood, right? So therefore, again, if the blood is separate and distinct from your body, you can't eat it midrabanan. And that's why if it's on the loaf of bread, you have to scrape off the blood and then you can eat the bread. But if the blood ultimately, again, is on your finger, in your gums, then ultimately, again, it's even on your finger, that's still part of your body. You're permitted to go ahead and ingest that. Quite fascinating. So Rabbi says, finish up. Rabbi Yeshua said you could even nurse, maybe you could even nurse up until 4 or 5 years. Vatanya. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, afilu chavilasu al kseifav, even if the child is holding its backpack, right? It's literally its peckle on its back. The child could still nurse. So which one is it? Is it 4 or 5, or is it holding the backpack? Idi v'idi chachura. It's the same thing. So Rabbi Yosef, halacha Rabbi Yoshua. The halacha ultimately follows Rabbi Yoshua that a child can nurse even up until 4 or 5 years of age. So we'll say, let's talk about this in just a moment. So we'll say, a number of interesting halachas over here. Number one we'll say is that ultimately, again, actually, we're not really finished yet because we have to speak about the cessation of nursing as well. But let me just show you this. Let's close this out before we move on. So we'll say, here's what we have. We have halacha l'maisa machlokes as to how long a child is permitted to nurse for. That's number one. Number two, the next part, which we haven't gotten to yet, is, well, let's see the Shulchan Aruch. Here we go. No, I'm going to do it now. Here we go. Pei Aleph. We'll say this is, but again, I apologize because we're going to be jumping ahead a little bit. So certain things I'm going to tell you now. We haven't done in the Gemara yet, but here is the halacha. Yardea Pei Aleph halacha Zayin. Chalav Isha Mutter. So I will say that is the first statement of the Shulchan Aruch. Human milk, a woman's milk, is mutter. So that's the halacha. Vohu shepirish. Qualification, assuming that what? She has expressed it into a kli. Kigon, shachavasa l'soch kli or l'soch hayad. Aval gadol hayonik mishtei isha ki yonik sheretz. So I will say if a gadol nurses from a woman, now we'll have to define what a gadol means, because remember again, we're saying, we're going to talk about the halacha l'maisa. So we'll say, so for a gadol to nurse from a woman, ultimately again, that is going to be kiyonik sheretz. Now we'll say, why is that? Let's talk about this in just a moment. If human milk is permitted, then what does it matter? What does it matter ultimately how it's ingested? Whether it's ingested from the mother, from the woman, or it's expressed into a kli and ingested like that. So the Taz comments on this, and the Taz says, "Da'asi lechlufe bebehema tmeya." So we'll say the concern is that if a person, after a certain age, and again we'll discuss what the age is, goes ahead and drinks the milk directly from the woman, there's a concern that one may come to confuse this case with ultimately the case of a behema tmeya. Now, how would you confuse it with the case of behema tmeya? Kevan shein derech lechal basar adam. So I will say this is fascinating. The Taz seems to be concerned with the following: that if we permit consumption of human milk directly from the mother at any stage and any age, then Lamaisa one will say, just like human flesh is unfit for consumption, yet you're permitted to drink the milk, they'll assume that the same halacha applies to behema tmeya, to a non-kosher animal. That although I can't go ahead and ingest, right? Although I can't eat the flesh, I can ingest the milk of a non-kosher animal. So to avoid that confusion, ultimately, again, human milk is permitted, but after the window of nursing closes, we'll establish when that is. Human milk could only be ingested if it's expressed into a kli. That's the Taz Rabosai, that's the distinction. Quite incredible. And therefore, Rabosai, if a person were to go ahead and directly ingest human milk from the woman, and after the window of nursing closes, when he's an adult, they would flog such a person with rabbinical lashes. We'll save the rest of Rabosai. So again, actually we'll see V'tinok yonek ad sof dalet shanim. So we'll say, what's the window for nursing? How do we paskin? Till the age of 4. At the end of 4 years, really it means up until the age of 5, right? For the first 4 complete years, through the 4th year, a child is permitted to go ahead and nurse like Rabbi Yoshua, lebari ve'helechola. We give an extra year of nursing for a child who is sickly. Interesting. Imlo piresh. I will say this is all assuming, so the window of nursing goes up until 4 or 5 years old, or really 5 or 6 years old, right? Through the 4th year, through the 5th year, depending on the health of the child. Imlo piresh, assuming that the child did not stop nursing. Aval piresh. Now, this is what I say, this we're going to get to in the next sugya. Let me leave the rest of this. So now you see the halacha is chalav isha mutar. And it's what we'll say, by the way, at any age. So in other words, I could consume chalav isha at any age. The only limitation is it has to be consumed from a kli once the nursing window has closed. Parenthetically, what's the nursing window? Through the 5th year for a healthy child, through the 6th year, through the 4th year for a healthy child, through the 5th year for a sickly child. But technically speaking, human milk could be consumed anytime afterwards as well, but only from a kli, not directly from the woman. Says the Taz, why? Lest you come to confuse this with a non-kosher animal. Good, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Tanya, Rabbi Marinus says, Goneach yonek chalav b'Shabbos. Well, so here's the case. Goneach literally means one is groaning. So I will say, in this context, groaning means that halacha l'maisa, usually it's some type of ailment with the heart. Person's having significant chest pain. So apparently, one of the cures or one of the treatments for heart attack, for chest pains, was milk directly from the animal. So you could go ahead and drink the milk directly from the udder of the animal on Shabbos. My taima, what's the reason? Yonek kimefarik achar yad. I will say now, normally again, so milking an animal on Shabbos is problematic, right? We saw this in Smichas Chaver. Milking an animal is the malacha of mefarik or dash, which is a derivative of borer. Anytime you extract something from a source, ultimately, again, it is a problematic halacha. It is a problematic malacha, excuse me. So one second. So drinking, so essentially milking the animal should be a problem of mafarik. Ultimately, my time, why is this permitted? Yonik mafarik. So let's say, number one, this is a shinoi, right? This is a shinoi. Why is this shinoi? Because no one normally drinks directly from the animal. Normally, again, you express the milk into a kli. Drink it like that. Here he's mamish drinking directly from the animal. So number one, it's a shinoi. Doing a malacha with the shinoi, who does what? Relegates it to the status of a derabanan. And Abba say, since this is a case of tsar, Chazal were not gozer. They did not decree in a case of tsar. Amrav Yosef, halach Rabbi Marinus. The halacha is Rabbi Marinus. Therefore, I will say if a person is having heart issues or chest pain issues, they could go ahead and drink directly from the animal. We'll say, by the way, this is a kosher animal, right? You're drinking kosher milk. The issue over here is not a hilchos kashrus issue. The issue over here is a hilchos Shabbos issue. But since number one, you're doing it with a shinui, and ultimately it's b'makom tsar, therefore it's going to be permitted. Tanya, Nocham Ish Galya Omer. Nocham Ish Galya says as follows, an interesting case. Tzinor sha'alu bo kashkashin. Tzinor is a gutter. It's a gutter. You have a gutter. Sha'alu bo kashkashin. Kashkashin means it got filled with debris. What's the problem now, says Rashi? What's the problem? The problem is because the gutter is filled with debris, the runoff water, the water is spilling over onto my roof and causing a leak in my house. So what do I want to do? I could press down the debris with my foot. So I can go up, press down the debris with my foot on Shabbos. First while and I don't have to be worried. I don't have to be worried. My taima, Shabbos saying, now what's the problem over here? What's the problem? This is really like tikkun mana, makibe patish, right? Maybe bona. In other words, that I'm fixing something, completing something. So this is a problem. To which the Gemara says, why is this permitted? Mitakin kila achayatu. Because Rabbi said the normal way you would go ahead and fix the gutter is how? Removal with your hand. Here, I'm simply just compacting that which is in there. So essentially, it's a shinui. So because it's a shinui, utilizing a shinui in a potential case of loss is going to be permitted. Amrav Yosef, halacha ki nachum ish galya. The halacha follows nachum ish galya. But it's an interesting case. You see that halacha l'maisa, doing a malacha with a shinui, goes ahead and whenever you do something with a shinui, it always what? It downgrades it to a drabanan. Downgrades to a drabanan. And the rabbis were not gozer in certain situations. For example, in a case where there's going to be a financial loss, Chazal were not gozer. Incredible. We'll say next halacha. Next halacha. Okay. Next halacha, I'm sorry. Good. So the Gemara says, Pirish, Shabbat say good. Pirish ta'achar esem ve'arba chodesh, the chazar kiyonik sheketz. Now, both say, here's what's interesting. Halacha l'maisa. Remember, the Brisa said before that if the baby stops nursing or the mother stops nursing the baby after 24 months, then the nursing window closes. And at that point, halacha l'maisa, if she were to continue to nurse her baby, then what? Kiyonik sheketz. We'll say it would be like nursing something that is bad. It's a bad practice. The kama. So we'll say here we go. So how long does she have to cease nursing for in order for the nursing window to effectively be closed? Amar Yehuda bar Chaviva, Amar Shmuel, Shloshi Yamim. 3 days. 3 days. So the Gemara says, so the Ikadamri, Tani Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva, Kamid Shmuel, Shloshi Yamim, Tan Rabbanon. So we'll say, so again, it seems to be that right now the number that's being floated, 3 days. Once you stop nursing for 3 days, the nursing window has closed, and halacha l'maisa we're done. So we'll say, Tanabanon, Meinekes shemeis ba'ila b'soch esem va'arba chodesh. What's the interesting case? Let's say a mother is nursing, right? Rachel and Reuven are married. Mazel tov, they have a baby, right? So Rachel is nursing the baby, and her husband dies. Her husband dies, b'soch esem va'arba chodesh. And her husband dies within the first 2 years of the baby's life. Harei zu lotis ares v'lo tinaseh. Rabbi say Rachel should not go in and get married, right? She shouldn't have erisin. She shouldn't have nisuin. Amud Beis ad esrim va'arba'a chodesh tiv Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi say she shouldn't have erisin or nisuin until her baby is at least 24 months old. Now Rabbi say, what are we concerned about over here? What are we concerned about? We are concerned that if Rachel gets remarried, what's going to happen? She's going to get pregnant. And her milk supply is going to go ahead and diminish. and that will, Rabbi say, so, and that will imperil her baby. Now, why is this a concern over here? In other words, why don't we say that every single woman who's nursing has to use birth control lest her pregnancy become, right, lest she become pregnant and her milk supply become diminished? Here's the difference. When Rachel's married to Reuven. Remember, let's play the case out again. Rachel's married to Reuven. Mazel tov, they have a son. Reuven dies. Let's say Nebuch, the baby is 6 months old. So now what happens? Chazal telling Rachel, you cannot get married until your son is 24 months old. What are we concerned about? Rachel's going to get remarried to Shimon. Let's say we're allowed to get remarried immediately, right? After 3 months, because that's really all you have to wait. After, right? 3 months. So wait 3 months, get remarried. So now what happens? Her son is now 6 months old. Let's say 6 months old. What's the concern? She gets remarried to Shimon, right? She's going to become pregnant. Her milk supply is going to be diminished. So now what's going to happen? We'll say, what happens when her milk supply is diminished? She has to supplement the diet of her son. What are we concerned about? That baby is not Shimon's son. So we are concerned that because it's not Shimon's son, he is not going to adequately provide for that baby. That's the concern. He's not going to adequately provide for a child that is not his own. So therefore, Rabbi say, in order to obviate that concern, what do Chazal say to Rachel? You can't get married until you finish nursing your child. Once your child is finished nursing, 2 years, 24 months, then Allah said, then you can get remarried. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, she can already get married. The truth is, she already get married at 18 months. 18 months, right? Because we'll say ultimately, again, we're not so concerned that 18 months, that's already the child has nursed sufficiently so that even if halacha l'maisa she gets pregnant and what her milk supply becomes diminished, her child will not be imperiled. Amar Rabbi Nassan bar Yosef, hein divrei Beis Shammai, hein divrei Beis Hillel. The truth is, we'll say these two opinions of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda are the very opinions of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. How so? Shebeis Shammai omrim esim va'arba chodesh. Beis Shammai says the child needs to nurse for 24 months. Ubeis Hillel shmona asar chodesh. Amar Shimon Gamliel. Ani achriya. Shimon Gamliel says the truth is I could even reach a little bit of a compromise. How so? Listen to this. L'divrei ha'omer esim va'arba chodesh. So, according to the opinion who says that really a child should nurse for 24 months, muteres linase be'esrim ve'echad chodesh. Really, the Rachel could already get married but at the time that her baby is 21 months old. Why Rabbi says we're going to see, because halacha l'maisa, even if one becomes pregnant, right, immediately upon getting remarried, her milk supply is not impacted until 3 months into the pregnancy. So remember again, if she gets married when her son is 21 months old, even if she becomes immediately pregnant, her milk supply won't be impacted until when? Her son is 24 months, and at that point in time anyway, he's ready to be weaned. Similarly, again, the opinion who says that ultimately, again, she needs to nurse for 18 months. In reality, she can already get remarried when her son is 15 months old. Because pregnancy does not diminish milk supply until 3 months in. So I will say, therefore, again, if she's getting married at 21 months, by the time the milk supply is diminished, the baby's already 24 months, she's good to go. Right? If she has to nurse until 18 months, according to Beis Shammai, halacha l'maisa, again, she fine get married at 15 months, even if she becomes pregnant. I will say, by the way, this also all presupposes that what? That she's getting pregnant immediately upon getting married to Shimon, her second husband. Fine. So Amar Ula said, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha ultimately follows Rabbi Yehuda, namely that a mother goes ahead and only needs to really nurse her child for 18 months. And therefore, Rabbi said, when she wants to get remarried, so halacha l'maisa, 18 months is going to be the window that we're looking at. So the Gemara says, "Va'amr li mar ukva, li hiti Rabbi Chanina, la seis la'achar chamisha asar chodesh." Rabbi said, this is incredible. Mar Ukva said something else. Not only does the halacha follow Rabbi Yehuda, that what? That a mother needs to nurse for 18 months, but ultimately, again, the halacha also follows the qualification of Shimon and Gamliel, because Mar Ukva said that Rabbi Chanina, so remember, Mar Ukva said, I had this case. I wanted to marry a woman who was widowed with an infant, and Rabbi Chanina allowed me to marry her when the baby was 15 months old. Why Rabbi says, play this out. Why 15 months? Why 15 months old? Because again, halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, namely that a mother has to nurse her child for 18 months, and the halacha follows from Shimon Gamliel that says that pregnancy doesn't impact the milk until when? 3 months in. Therefore, I was permitted to marry this widow when her baby was 15 months old, because ultimately, again, we got married, and even if she got pregnant immediately, her milk supply would remain unaffected. Incredible. We'll say, listen to this, another story. It's fascinating. Arise de Abaye. We'll say an incredible Gemara. Arise de Abaye. Listen to this. Abaye had a worker, a sharecropper. His sharecropper came before him. Amrli, so he said to him, the sharecropper had a shaila. So the sharecropper said like this: I met a woman. Nebuch, she was widowed. She has an infant child, right? The baby is 15 months old. Can I go ahead and do erisin? That was just to point out. He's talking about erisin. Can I go ahead and do erisin with this woman? So the Gemara says, Amrle. So he said to him, so I'll say, if you take a look, by the way, fine. So Amrle, so first of all, so now Abaye is clearing the shaila, right? He's analyzing the shaila. First of all, when there's a machlokes Rabbi and Rabbi Huda, the halacha follows Rabbi Huda. But remember again, Rabbi Huda said 18 months, right? Va'od beisham beis halacha beis Hillel. Va'amar ula halacha Rabbi Huda. Va'amar mar ukva li hiti Rabbi Chanina laseis la'achar chamisha asar chodesh. Shabbos say Abaye is bringing all of the things that we just said. Number one, the halacha follows Rabbi Huda. Number two, the halacha follows Beis Hillel. Sorry, namely. So therefore, what's the nursing window? 18 months. Furthermore, again, Mar Ukva said that Rabbi Chanina allowed him to get married after 15 months because the milk supply is only impacted when? 3 months into pregnancy. Kol shekein da'at li ares. So Abaye says to a sharecropper, all the more so you're not even asking to get married. What are you asking to do? Erisin. We'll say Erisin not even living together. So Abaye thought based on all of these factors, there's absolutely no problem for the Aris to go ahead and do Erisin with this woman who has a 15-month-old baby. Okay? Kios like Rav Yosef, Shabbos say, when Abaye comes before Rav Yosef, Shabbos say, and he told Rav Yosef this whole Maisa. And he told Rav Yosef how he paskined. So Amrle Rav Yosef said to him, Abaye, Amrle, Rav Ushmol Amrit Abayu, Srichin lahamtin as esrim va'arba chodesh chutz miyom shenolad bo v'chutz miyom shenis arsa bo. So let's listen to this. This is incredible. So Rav Yosef says, Abaye, by the way, maybe you missed this day in yeshiva, but Rav and Shmuel paskind that halacha l'maisa, when a woman is widowed with an infant child, Chazal made a low plug. Rabbi say, what's the low plug? They enacted a waiting window, right? They enacted a window of 24 months that a woman who has a newborn cannot get married. And that 24 months excludes the day the baby was born, excludes ultimately, again, the day that she gets married. In other words, Rabbi say, what Chazal did is, in order to safeguard the infant child, they instituted a marriage moratorium on the mother, on the widow. Because Rabbi says, we're concerned that sometimes a woman, in her eagerness to get remarried, may do certain things to compromise the health, safety, and security of her child. We'll see. Rabbi say, understand, by the way, because we'll talk about it. We'll get to it in just a moment. So therefore, again, Rav Yosef says to Abaye, Rav and Rav Yosef said, a woman who has an infant can't get married until that baby is 24 months old. And that's a low plug. That's across the board. So Rod Basrei, so here's the problem. Abaye just realized what happened. What happened? He issued an erroneous psak. He allowed the sharecropper to do erisin when? After 15 months. Rod Basrei Tlasa Parsi, he ran after the sharecropper 3 parsos, which is large distance. Others say it was 1 parasa, but it was in the sand. Say running in the sand is difficult. Velo adkare, and he did not catch up with him. In other words, he couldn't find the guy. Amr Abaye, Abaye was very upset. He said, Amr Abaye, this is what Chazal meant when they said, a person should not even paskin a simple shaila in the presence of their Rebbe. What's an example of a simple shaila? Biasa b'kuscha. Biasa is an egg. Kuschas kusach. I will say, what's kusach? I will say kusach was, it's an old-time favorite, right? Kusach was a dip that was made out of moldy bread and curdled milk. It makes your mouth water just thinking about it, right? So, and it goes with everything. Right? I'm sorry? Some on the counter, right? There might actually be some on the counter in the back, right? There might be, look behind the counter, you may find some kusach. Let's say, so again, it's interesting. So let's say, let's an example of a simple shaila. Can you dip your egg in kusach? Now we'll say, can you dip an egg in kusach? Of course you can dip an egg in kusach. I will say, there's no shaila. So Abaye say, there's an expression that says that in the presence of your Rebbe, you should not paskin even the easiest of shailas. So Abaye was upset because I remember again, Abaye lived in the locale of his Rebbeim of Rav and Shmuel, and he should not have paskined this shaila in their presence. And he did. And what happened? He made a mistake. Rabbi said, this is incredible. Now, why is it that a person shouldn't paskin in the presence of their Rebbe? Lo mishum demechse kapikursa. Rabbi said, it's not because that it looks disrespectful. Ela mishum delo mistaya mil salam emra. Rabbi say this is incredible because you know why you shouldn't paskin in the presence of your Rebbe? Because it simply doesn't work out well. Lo mistayim milsalim, Rabbi say means literally again the right words do not come to your mouth. Rabbi say what Abaye is saying is something absolutely amazing, and it has two levels. Rabbi say first of all, in the world of Hora, in paskining halacha, in order to paskin a shayla, in order to answer a shayla appropriately, one needs siyata d'shmaya. One needs divine providence. And I will say, divine providence is only given to those who conduct themselves in an appropriate way. So a Talmud is in the presence of his Rebbe, he should not be passing halacha. He should be deferential to his Rebbe. If he is not deferential to his Rebbe, he's just not going to have the siyata d'shmaya. He's just not going to have the level of divine providence necessary in order to deliver an appropriate ruling. But I want to point, the Gemara ends up and he says, listen to this, Abaye, he says, ana hava gamina leilahad Rabbi Shmuel. The say, listen how crazy this is. Abaye says, by the way, I was in yeshiva that day when they taught this halacha Rav and Shmuel. In other words, I was there. I was there for the shir. I heard this halacha. I learned it. But nevertheless, because I paskin in the presence of my Rebbe, in the locale of my Rebbe, even though I learned this halacha, I didn't have the siyata d'shmaya to paskin appropriately, and therefore again I issued an erroneous ruling, which I will say is really an incredible halacha. So I'll just point out, by the way, it's not just true in paskining halacha. What the Gemara is sensitizing us to is that to be spiritually successful, you need siyata d'shmaya. Everyone needs divine providence. So I will say, and we know this, right? In life, you could do all the right things, take all the right steps. But if the Ribono Shel Olam does not bless my efforts, I'm not going to be successful. That's why a person has to live a life that is in step with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If I'm not in step with the Ribono Shel Olam, if I don't have a life where I'm in sync with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then I don't have siyata d'shmaya. And if I don't have siyata d'shmaya, stuff in life doesn't work out. I will say, it's an interesting exercise. You ever have a situation in life where you do all the right things and things still don't work out the way they quote-unquote should have? So sometimes that just happens in life because it just happens in life. But sometimes I will say it's an interesting exercise to ask yourself, am I living with siyata d'shmaya? In other words, am I living in step with the Ribono Shel Olam? Am I living, like are we walking hand in hand? Are we living, right? Are we living side by side? And if I am, okay, then obviously this is hashgacha. But if I'm not, sometimes the reason why things don't materialize the way they're supposed to is because, again, I'm not in step with my Father. And if I'm not in step with my Father, I don't have that same level of siyata d'shmaya. Incredible Gemara. Let's go back to Tarabanan. Nasna ben alaminekes o gimalsa omes. Well, it's an interesting case. So let's say a woman gives over. So we'll say, now we've transitioned a little bit. So I just want to point out, we still have a couple of open-ended issues. Namely, again, halacha lamaisa, again, at what point does the nursing window, and although we saw that in the Shulchan Aruch already, 4 or 5 years, depending on the child. So we'll say, now we've transitioned a little bit into a different discussion, which is the ability of a nursing mother to remarry. And it sounds like there is a takanas chazal that a woman who is nursing cannot get married until her child is 2 years old. 2 years old, and that's a low plug. That's across the board. Watch this. Tana banan. Nasna ben alaminakes o gamalso o mace mutaras linasim yad. Supposed to listen to this. What happens if a woman hired a wet nurse? Right, Rachel is widowed. Ruvain died. But she has money. So Rachel hired a wet nurse. And ultimately, again, now the wet nurse is nursing her baby. Or ultimately, again, the baby was weaned. The baby stopped nursing. I said, not every baby nurses. Baby stopped nursing after a year. Or, chas v'shalom, the baby died. Now, what is Rachel's ability to get remarried? Mutaris linasim yad. Bryce says she can get married immediately. We'll say, what's the logic? The marriage moratorium was for what purpose? So as not to compromise the health of the child. Well, in this case, there's a wet nurse, or the baby's already weaned, or chas v'shalom, the baby died. Rav Papa, Rav Huna Rav Yoshua, Savar, Leme Avad of the Kiyamas Nisa. Shabbos, Rav Papa, Rav Huna Rav Yoshua wanted to paskin in accordance with this brayso. Amra Luhu, Hahi Safta. Who says, listen to this? A Safta said to them, Bididi Hava Uvda. This situation, she said, I was a young widow with an infant, Va'asra li Rav Nachman. And Rav Nachman said, I could not get married until after 24 months. Now, I will say, she doesn't indicate exactly what it is that happened. Or in other words, what was it? Was it that her baby, she hired a wet nurse, the baby was weaned, or chas v'shalom, child died? She doesn't say, but again, the idea is, she said, I was in this matzav, right? I was in this circumstance. And even though I no longer needed to nurse a child, Rav Nachman said I still had to wait 24 months before getting remarried. Ini, is that so? V'harav Nachman sharluhu lebereish galusa. Yet Rav Nachman allowed the women of the house. What was I in the reish galusa? What's remember? Who's the reish galusa? Reish galusa, where there was the leadership of the Jews in Bavel. Shabbos say there was a situation where someone in the house of the reish galusa, a woman became widowed, and ultimately, again, Rabbi say, what would they do? Now, in general, in the house of the reish galusa, mothers were not normally nursing their children. Rather, what would happen? They would hire wet nurses. So Rabbi say, so ultimately, again, Rav Nachman said once they're in the house of the Reish Galusa, that these women could get married even earlier than 24 months. To which the Gemara says, no. Shani Reish Galusa the law hadibahu. It's different as Reish Galusa. Rabbi say, what's the concern? There's a concern with the wet nurse. What's the concern with the wet nurse? Even if a woman hires the wet nurse, what's the concern? She may back out of the employment. And therefore, again, the mother is once again with the responsibility to nurse her child. There's no concern of backing out of employment with the Reish Galusa. Right? It would be a bad idea, because also the Reish Galusa are pretty powerful people. It would be a very bad idea to back out on employment with the Reish Galusa. That's why, so that was an exception to the rule. Amur Rapapa, va'ason lo tizbru meha. Why don't you bring a raya from here? Rabbi say, here we go. Tisanya, hare shaisa redufa le'licha le'beisavia. So we'll say like this. Let's say we have a case of marital discord. Reuven is married to Rachel. Things are not good. And therefore, even during the marriage, Rachel was often spending a lot of time in her parents' house. Or there was a lot of fighting with her and Reuven. Or her husband was incarcerated. Or her husband went overseas. Or her husband was too old for physical intimacy, or he was old. So we'll say, by the way, what's the common denominator in all these cases? The common denominator in all these cases is most husband and wife are not living together. Because they're not living together, we'll say, there's no concern that she's pregnant, right? Or he's sick. Shaisa or she was sterile. Uzikena, or she was old. Islandess. Kitana, or she miscarries immediately after the death of her husband, or or her husband is incapable of having children. I was saying all of these cases, right? So again, I will say long list here. Rachel's married to Reuven. So in all of these cases, I will say again, either she spent most of the marriage by her parents' house, away from her house, or they're always fighting, or her husband was incarcerated, or he went overseas, or he was sick, or he was old, or she was sterile, she was an islandess, she was a kitana, she just miscarried, her husband wasn't able to have children. All these cases, husband dies. Now I will say, based on any of these cases when husband dies, what do we know with really pretty much absolute certainty? She's not pregnant. Yet. What's the halacha? Kulan tzrichos lahamtin shlosha chadashim dir Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, all of these women, Rabbi say, can you imagine? I'll give you even an extreme case. Reuven's married to Rachel. They've been married for 70 years, right? Rachel is 90 years old, pushing the walker with the tennis balls, right? And now what happens to Rachel? And now Baruch Hashem, she met someone in the nursing home, right? She met someone. And at that age, there's no waiting. There's no let's plan the wedding, right? Let's pop the dentures back in and let's do this, right? Let's go. What do we tell Rachel? Gotta wait 3 months. Right? Gotta wait 3 months. 3 months. They'll say why? Again, remember, as kind of like strange as it sounds, if you think about this from a legal perspective, it makes sense. I will say legal frameworks have to work across the board, right? If you start saying it applies here, but it doesn't apply, you can't do that. The halacha is, if a woman is widowed, 3 months of havchana. 3 months of havchana. They're married. Rabbi Yossi went to the RC. Rabbi Yossi says no. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says halacha l'maisa, not true. In the case where we know for sure the woman's not pregnant, she'd get married immediately. Ultimately, we'll say that halacha is like Rabbi Meir. So we'll say, what do you see from here? That whenever Chazal make a takana, the takana applies across the board. Therefore, we'll say, coming back to our case, Chazal instituted that what? That a woman can't get married. If she's widowed with a young child, she can't get married until that baby is how old? 24 months. It doesn't matter what her personal circumstances are. That is the halacha. So Amrali, he said to him, you're right, lava daitin. I forgot that's the halacha. The hilchasa, I will say, what's the halacha? Meis mutter, gemalto aser. I will say the halacha is, if the child died, if the baby Nebuch died, then she's permitted to get married. Because I will say, that's an exception, right? That's an outlier case. But ultimately, again, if she went ahead but if the baby was weaned, so ultimately, again, that does not permit her to get married any earlier. Even if the baby died, ultimately, again, it's still aser. Dilma katla leiva azla uminsaba. I will say this is wild. What are we concerned about? We're concerned that if a woman knows that if her child dies, she can get married immediately, that what's going to happen? Chas v'shalom, she's going to kill the child. She's going to kill the child in order to get married. The Gemara says, Hava uvda v'chankaseh. This happened, it happened that a mother Nebuch strangled her child in order to be able to get married. The Gemara says, don't bring a raya. V'lohi hahi shota havi. I will say that was obviously a case of an ill woman, of an ill woman. Delo avdi nashi dechan kasan benayu. Women, I will say, no matter how desperate they may be to get married, because most remember again, marriage represented a sense of security and safety. So a woman would be desperate to get married, especially with an infant child. No woman who is normal is going to chas v'shalom imperil her child, ultimately for the purpose of getting married. But nevertheless, Rabbi say, again, we'll stop over here for today. But l'maisa, but what do we see? We'll see in the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi say, but the halacha is a low plug. If a woman is widowed with a newborn child, halacha l'maisa, she cannot get remarried until that child is 2 years old. That seems what the halacha is saying. Ultimately, again, low plug. No different than the halacha that says a woman can't get married 3 months after being widowed. Al tzavchana. She also can't get married until a child reaches the age of 2 in order to ensure the safety and security of the child. Now, whether or not that's the halacha l'maisa, in Meretz Hashem, we'll see in tomorrow's daf. Rabbi say, was it incredible? Exactly. Rabbi say, shkoyach, have a great day. All right, Chavra on Zoom, have a great day, everyone.